Going on YouTube, John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We have another Warhammer 40K video for you guys here that was requested by one of my YouTube members. Abuse in Angron Tale, Warhammer 40K audio by A Vox in the Void. Links will be down below in the description to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to A Vox in the Void channel. Please do me a favor, smash that like button on this video if you enjoy it, and go give him a sub if you're not already subbed him. He makes a lot of great content in the 40K universe. Does a lot of good voice acting, etc. So if you enjoy his content, please do me a favor and hit the sub. If you would like to come and join in while we do these live reactions, love to have you guys join in discussions. Come join us, have talks, etc. Give your 2 cents on everything we're going through. There is a link down below in the description as well as a join button. Check out the YouTube membership benefit tiers, get early access to videos, get priority in any kind of reaction requests, etc., etc. Take a look at it, see if you'd like to join and become a member. We'd love to have you guys come in and hang out. But with all that being said, shameless plugs done. Let's take a look at this here video. Abuse in Angron Tale, Warhammer 40K audio by Vox in the Void.
Whirring, growling teeth, titanic shuddering blows, screaming, howling rage. Precept Ibrahim Il-Farad could do nothing but stare at the bunker's blast doors. The doors shuddered in their plasteel frame with every bang, loosing jagged flecks of grated metal. Another strike, and the doors seemed to buckle, splitting steel dust that fell in sheens of glinting grey. To his left, Administrator Tahik placed a pistol in her mouth and pulled the trigger.
Yikes.
The precept shuddered as blood splattered across his cheek. He thought he could see the whirring blades of the chain axe now, clawing through the door. He had heard tales of the weapon, Widowmaker. Il-Farad thought of his wife, cowering in the back rooms with his infant son. The precept heard another gunshot come from inside the bunker. Its echoes mingled with the prayers of his staff, muttered, whispered pleas to the 8 fire spirits of the divine sands. The blast door sagged for
I don't
one
think the fire spirits are gonna hear you, brother.
Before they split in two and slammed against the floor. A giant charged through the destruction, howling as it set upon the precept and bifurcated him vertically in one.
So far from this one too, this background audio that he's added into this one is pretty dope. Gunfire, the sounds of the door rattling, and now that howling. You know, okay, all right, getting some high production value going on here. Okay.
An immense strike of its axe. In the brief second before Il-Farad died, he reflected that the monster's howl was not what he had expected. Before he died, Il-Farad thought that it had been a howl of anguish rather than rage. Angron, Primarch of the 12th Legion and Lord of the Red Sands, brooded in the remains of the enemy's high command bunker. He was surrounded by the torn-apart corpses of the dead. There were no survivors. He stared at the bunker's cogitator intelligences that automatically summarized garbled Vox reports for the enemy. They contained no great surprise. The foe had suffered complete collapse on 100 different fronts, desperate retreats and aborted consolidations. Utter breakdown of morale in command. They were defeated, and the World Eaters would hunt down the rest like dogs after terrified mountain rabbits. No quarter would be offered, just slaughter, continuing long into the night before the Primarch eventually called off his hounds. Angron panted. A melter lance had caused a great furrow in his side, blackening the armor of Mars and wounding his bioengineered flesh. It was no great matter, just another...
Even a melter didn't really seem to stop him, huh? Interesting.
The scar overlaying the triumph rope. That white line of scar tissue that charted each combat victory across his body. The Primarch's enemies had been numerous and well-trained, but Angron had killed them all. And then he had killed the High Rider who had sent brave men and women into battle from behind cogitator banks and plasteel doors. The Primarch closed his eyes. Waves of serotonin hormones flooded him with a deep, almost giddy pleasure. The butcher's nails loosening their screws for a few blessed minutes. But already the Primarch could feel it wearing off, leaving behind...
God, yeah, I really couldn't imagine that. Like, you think about, like, the worst migraine pain ever, and it can only be like subsided by the feelings of anger. You know what I mean? Like, he's like the Primarch version of Hulk, with implants in him that force him to be angry all the time. You know what I mean?
Mind a miasmic nothingness. He sighed, trying to hold on to that feeling of feeling, knowing that he could do nothing to prevent its evaporation. And then, just black, treacle sludge. A sudden, mounting fatigue. A dull, grinding pain that started in his temples and twisted his nerves into contorted knots. His face, recently twisted into a furious grin, settled into an empty, flat expression. A feeling of cold rippled down his spine. His shoulders sagged. At the insistent beeping of his Vox bead, Angron answered the call.
What? The enemy positions are overrun, Father.
Yeah.
We're approaching the main civilian population centers. Shall I let loose your hounds?
Angron could hear the eagerness to please in Khan's voice. His equerry reminded him of the gladiator Matul, that same strange mix of stubborn defiance and desperate longing for approval. It had taken Matul some convincing to join Angron's rebellion. The Primarch frowned.
I mean, it just made me think of, like, you know, the whole thing with Spartacus and Crixus and how they were kind of against each other. I don't know, I wonder if there's any kind of basis of his tale, you know, on that story.
Matul had lived until the very end. Angron remembered meeting his gaze on Deshalika Ridge. They had nodded to each other, two warriors sharing a gesture of mutual respect, the acceptance of one final battle against the High Riders of Nuceria.
Father?
Angron thought of the braying crowds that had watched him from the stalls above the arenas. There had been so many of them that their faces had blended together. Dusty, sand-swept faces, weak shoulders pressed together in their swaddling rags. All of them complicit in his slavery. All of them complicit in the killing and the butchery.
Let them loose, Khan. Kill them all. The Emperor has no use for fire
what's up, man?
worshippers. Will you join?
Going pretty good. Got through the first video, going through this next one from the Vox and Void. Enjoying it so far. Well, yeah, man, thanks for popping in, dude. Hope you're having a good one. Hope you enjoy your dinner. Always good to see you, brother.
Join us.
Angron paused. He could hear triumphant horns blaring through the Vox bead. Something in that noise raised the Primarch's hackles. He heard himself making a low growl, almost a whine.
No.
The Primarch ended the call, suddenly trembling. Angron was sure he had heard those horns before. He blinked and punched the console in front of him. The force of his blow shattered the cogitator into sparking pieces. But still he heard the same mocking, triumphant blare of horns. Something in Angron's mind snapped, and he was overwhelmed by memory. He lashed out with Widowmaker, a great swipe of blaring teeth cutting apart Onomaeus' flesh as the old gladiator.
Man, I just can't help but think, like, how sick it would be if when Creative Assembly is actually done with Total War fantasy, you know, franchise with what they're doing. God, a 40K, you know, version of the Total War game would be pretty fucking dope, man. It just really would. It just really would. Like, I've got a couple of you know, games in the 40K universe I still need to play. I got Space Marine 1 I need to play through. I got Battle Sector to play through. Actually, the only one that I've ever really played through is Dawn of War 2, which I actually wouldn't mind playing through again and have a refresh on. I have Dawn of War 3 that I've never played through, but, like, I don't know, man. Just the scale and how the battles are in the Total War ones, man. Like, I don't know, just the way he's describing all this fighting and everything going on. Like, I just want a 40K Total War game, man. I just do. I just do.
Gladiator fell back. Angron grabbed at Onomaeus' head and drove his thumbs through the pulp of their eyes. The gladiator opened his mouth to scream as Angron found the soft flesh of his brain, mouth fizzing bile and blood as Angron slammed their skull again and again against the pommel of a discarded sword. The Primarch could feel floods of intense, driving pleasure blasting through his brain, an overwhelming cathartic release of undiluted rage that obliterated all the pain and despair of his mutilated mind. He released his grip and began punching, slamming his fist into the soft tissue above the ridge of Onomaeus' nose. He punched again and again and again before the bones splintered and all he was punching was wet, compacted sand. The crowds were cheering, howling in exultation, horns sounding in irregular...
So yeah, he's having a memory of when he was on... Yeah, he was in an arena in a gladiatorial fight and beating the absolute shit out of this guy.
Discordant noise, blaring louder and louder and louder. He paused. In front of him was the shattered remains of the cogitator banks, fizzing, broken pieces of obliterated machinery. Like Onomaeus, it had not fought back. The Primarch padded down the corridors.
So he didn't fight back at all, and he just beat him to death. Interesting.
Indifferent to the devastation he had wrought. Loose limbs and viscera were cast about, staining the floors and the walls with red. His own armor was repainted in arterial blood. When Angron glanced at the gore, he felt nothing but a dull stirring of nostalgia, the shadow of savage release. Just enough feeling to remind him that he barely felt anything at all. He slowly traveled back to the adamant.
Well, I mean, that definitely paints light of the kind of depiction of Angron, you know what I mean? Unfeeling enough to the point where this person who was a father figure to him, he literally beat him to death with his own bare hands, and the man didn't put up a fight against them at all. For the, I guess, cheers of the crowd. I mean, I don't know. He's got, at that point, I assume he's got, you know, the nails in him, so he might not have had a choice. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Resolve, taking a lonely shuttle ride through the planet's orbit. If he had cared to look, he would have seen the cities burning. The mile-wide plumes of black, choking smoke, the burn pits of mass graves. But he had seen such things before. Instead, he just stared at the floor, allowing his thoughts to sink into the sludging murk of his depressive soul. Acting on disassociated autopilot, Angron made his way to the apothecarian, allowing the bustling menials to carefully remove his damaged armor and tend to his wounds beneath. As the medics applied salves to his burns, the nails sang a song of slaughter and bloodshed. Angron imagined breaking the wrist of the one who placed gauze against his skin, throwing them through the medical gurneys, reaching for Widowmaker and killing them all, rampaging across his ship, slaying everything he found, maiming, ripping.
Right,
tearing.
That's what I thought.
Angron closed his eyes and breathed slow, deliberate breaths. He was loath to repress the only feeling he had left, but he did so anyway. He retired to his chambers early that night, finding no enthusiasm to join the victory feasts. He knew his legion would be hurt by his absence, but he could not bring himself to care. They were not his sons, no more than the Emperor was his father.
So yeah, he's definitely another Primarch that doesn't give a shit about his sons, it seems like, you know, along with Kovis and, or not Kovis, again, I'm getting confused. Conrad is what I'm saying. There was someone else who was a Primarch, really didn't give a shit about his legion. I'm trying to think of off the top of my head. Not Alfarius. Anyway, let's continue. But it's pretty obvious from his demeanor that, you know, he's the type of person who doesn't give a shit about his legions. You know, to him, they're essentially just lapdogs that are enslaved to essentially his will, and thus also the Emperor's. Perturabo, yeah, I think it was Perturabo, yeah.
His father had been named Onomaeus, and Angron had never wanted children of his own. He sat in the darkness, listening to the steady beats of his hearts and the arrhythmic beeps of the spaceship's machinery. Minutes passed, followed by hours. As time crawled onward, Angron tried to stir up some emotion in himself. He thought of the military victory he had just won, but could find nothing to savor. No sense of satisfaction or triumph from the bloody subjugation of the planet below. He thought of his so-called sons, their desperation to please him. But he couldn't dislodge any pity or despair from his hearts. The nails had deadened him to all feeling. His world had drained of color. But there was still time. Still time to join the victory celebrations that would continue deep into the night. Still time to find some shadow of companionship or joy. Angron willed himself to stand, to act, to do something. But the motivation never came. He sat there until he felt tired, and then he lay down on his bed and closed his eyes. Like every night after a battle, Angron slept fitfully and dreamed of home. He was waiting for the Rexium Royal Dragoons.
It's interesting how he has such, I guess a reverence for his home. I wonder if it was, I haven't really gotten into Angron's story too terribly much. So I wonder if it's just a situation where he felt like the only kind of family or fellowship he had were the people on, the gladiators at his home world. But at the same time, it's like, he murdered his father figure, or at least was kind of forced to, having the nails put into his head. So yeah, I don't know. He seems like he's a man full of contradictions.
The latest company sent by the High Riders to bring his Eaters of Cities to heal. His stomach was pressed flat against the rough stone of the cliffside, jabbing his flesh as he slowed his breathing to a steady, predatory beat. Ignoring the screaming of the nails, he tested the rope that connected to his harness, pulling it taut against the belay driven into mountainous rock. He glanced to his side, grinning at his fellow gladiators. Like him, they pressed their bodies against the ground, hands itching around the hilts of swords and axes. Beneath them, a winding mountain path forced the Royal Dragoons into a narrow marching formation.
Every time someone says Dragoons, I just can't help but think of like the Dragoons from Final Fantasy.
Angron heard their trumpets before he saw them, preening fops in their bright blue uniform and pristine military caps. This was not the first army Angron and his gladiators had destroyed, but the enemy was still confident, as if the notion of slaves defeating them was utterly unthinkable. Angron breathed. The nails wanted him to attack, to throw himself from the cliffside and sprint towards the enemy's formation. He felt himself inch forwards, his fingers digging into the unyielding metal of his weapon's pommel. Angron! He blinked, glancing back to Hamat. The gladiator's face was a gnarled mess of tough scar tissue. His nose was permanently off-center, crooked where it had been broken too many times to count. A jutting forehead and a strong jawline gave the impression of some murderous beast, but Angron knew Hamat. They had fought together and drank together, and Angron recognized the concern in his brother's eyes. Hamat tapped at his scalp, where the butcher's nails clasped tight like a coiled metal crab. Winding spools of arcane machinery resembled clumps of hair where they spat from beneath the warrior's skull. And yet, Hamat grinned. "Don't let the bastards win, my brother." Angron nodded. He forced down the nail's influence and inched back into position. On the other side of the mountain path, an incline of loose scree and boulders hid the other half of Angron's force, clutching makeshift blades and scavenged lasguns.
So they haven't really talked about who they're fighting yet. They're fighting someone, I guess these might be, I don't know. They'd mentioned earlier in this that these are the people potentially responsible for his enslavement, but I think that was just like a memory, like he was working off that memory to build up his rage when he was in the fight. So I'm not really sure who they're fighting right now.
They crouched behind cover and held their nerve as the Royal Dragoons marched forwards. Angron could see each of them gritting their teeth, desperately holding back the butcher's nails before the enemy were in prime position. Angron knew it was only a matter of time before someone snapped, and bullets began to fly. He focused his growing anger on the Royal Dragoons. Their egg-blue finery seemed ridiculous against the...
Yeah, and I mean... Yeah, that's you know, kind of a sad effect from, like, the daddy issues that a lot of them had. I'm sure a lot of the Primarchs felt abandoned. They grew up without any kind of guidance from the Emperor, even though it wasn't necessarily the Emperor's choice. And some of them, you know, they're essentially given a legion of you know, they had a genetically modified, you know, army given to them based off their own genome without really any consultation, obviously, without any input on how to do things from them. And so it could easily be seen as like a symbol of, again, just being tools for the Emperor and not really anything else, you know, because they just see these legions of essentially lesser copies of themselves. They could even probably see their own failings in other versions of Astartes, etc. High Riders of the Ruling Crafts of Nuceria. This is another flashback. Okay.
Backdrop of barren rock. They marched in perfect time. Lasgun cradled against their shoulders. So proud. So resplendent. None of these men or women had ever fought in the bloody sands of a gladiatorial pit. None of them had ever experienced real suffering apart from the tame, sanitized exertions of boot camp. The nails pulsed in Angron's head. A small flush of serotonin mingling sweetly with adrenaline waves. The temptation had become almost unbearable. Lasfire spat down at the formation, cutting down a dozen of the Royal Dragoons as the Eaters of Cities screamed.
I really do like the audio production he's put in this one with a lot of the background stuff.
Bloody exultation. A couple gladiators abandoned their cover and launched themselves at the soldiers, but the enemy was disciplined, even in the face of ambush. When a trumpet sounded, they turned in perfect formation, and a volley of fire left the two gladiators twitching on the ground. The rest of the ambushers scrambled up the rocky slope, lasfire snapping at their heels as they ducked and weaved from boulder to boulder.
Wait.
Angron growled.
Wait.
Having turned to face the ambush, the Royal Dragoons now had their back to the cliffs. They began to advance up the hill, their formation staggering as soldiers slipped and tripped over loose scree. They were too confident in their numbers, too confident in their equipment. They did not see the fleeing gladiators for what they were. Only one stage in an elaborate trap. Angron nodded, jumping forwards.
He heard rope zip across the metal of his clip harness, abruptly tightening before his belayer provided slack. With reckless speed, he abseiled down the sheer face as if running across flat ground. His cliffside gladiators charged alongside, succumbing to the madness of the butcher's nails and roaring in vengeance and hate. Angron was screaming too. Screaming for the gladiators he had been forced to kill. Screaming against the horror of his mutilation. Screaming for Onomaeus. The enemy's formation was still broken across uneven terrain, sending them sliding and falling on the loose rock when they tried to turn to face the new threat. A few shots cracked past him, but Angron was upon the Royal Dragoons before they could unleash a full volley of fire. He drove his axe into the neck of the first man he reached, decapitating him in a wild swing. A mortal might have been unbalanced by such a reckless strike, but the iron sinews in Angron's arm snapped taut as he redirected his weapon. He hacked into the side of another soldier, and as they fell, he pounced forwards. He battered aside a bayonet thrust and cracked open a skull with a vertical chop. All around him, his Eaters of Cities smashed into the foe, a bloody, predatory claw ripping at a prey beast's exposed belly.
Eaters of Cities.
The Royal Dragoons had been trained to perfection by 100 drills, but training did not prepare them for the hack and slash of close quarter, gladiatorial combat.
Yeah.
Angron's...
It's like, I think it was Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face. That's pretty much how a lot of times it goes in war, you know? You have a perfectly laid out plan, but, you know, doesn't always necessarily mean it's gonna play out that way.
Screamed as he cut down another man, dodging the swipe of a power sword and punching the officer in the throat to prevent another attack. He felt the man's trachea fracture. Nonetheless, he followed up with an axe blow that severed the arm from the shoulder. Angron could feel the blood sticky and warm across his face, an intense, cathartic delight driving him to ever greater heights of aggression. He stamped hard on the man's chest and sought his next victim.
I would assume that would probably crush his ribcage.
Already the enemy's morale was broken, and a bloody massacre was taking place. The surviving Royal Dragoons broke ranks, desperately trying to escape the melee, their pristine uniforms soiled with blood, dirt, and piss. One fell to his knees before Angron, begging for mercy even as Angron took their head and slammed it against a rock. Another fled him, howling as Angron's axe buried into their back.
Kill! Kill!
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like his kind of origin story in this is very much like a Spartacus kind of situation, you know, being forced to be a gladiator in an arena and fight for the movements of others, not wanting to. And then for his defiance, he gets, you know, the nails implanted in him, and then is forced to kill someone close to him. And then eventually seems to have started a rebellion and is now hunting down his captors and getting revenge on them. And I wonder if it's a situation where in kind of the final moment, the Emperor comes and takes him away.
Kill!
Which, I mean, if that's the case, I could understand the feeling of hatred towards that, you know, because it's going to be an unresolved issue forever.
Angron sat on the edge of a gore-strewn boulder, panting for breath. He was surrounded by hundreds of corpses. His gladiators were picking through them, taking blades, guns, and ammunition for the battles to come. Angron could feel the hormones draining from his system, the dull ache of miasma reasserting itself over his mutilated mind. Hamat wandered up to him. The gladiator was injured. A long cut opened him up from shoulder blade to gut.
Damn.
Angron glanced up with a grunt.
You should get that seen to.
Hamat shrugged. He sat beside the Primarch. I've had worse.
How many did we lose?
A few dozen, maybe 40. Nothing compared to what we inflicted.
They have lives and more to spare, and our supplies are low.
I know, Angron. I know. We all understand. But it doesn't matter. This day is ours, and we would not trade it for the years they would offer us in chains. You have given us this day, and that is enough.
I wish I could clasp them all in irons. I wish I could mutilate their flesh the way they mutilated ours.
We humiliate them, Angron. For the High Riders, maybe that's worse.
No.
Yeah,
They
probably
will
not.
forget this humiliation when our dead bodies are just skeletons grinning up at the sun. They will say we were fools.
Let them say what they like. We choose freedom. Only a diseased soul can call that foolish. Hamat picked at a clump of dried blood on his leg, thinking. I once spoke to a wise man, a philosopher who visited the cells beneath the arenas of the Shea. He said that the best revenge is to be unlike your enemy.
Useless words. The man had the privilege of choice. We had no choice. We were forced to kill.
Maybe. But still, I don't want to enslave them. I don't want to mutilate their brains. My revenge on them is to be the better man, despite everything they have done to us.
Very philosophical, Hamat.
Yeah,
But that's
I mean, one thing to say you're going to be the better man, but oftentimes in war, that doesn't lead you anywhere. You know what I mean? Doesn't really gain you anything, and if anything, it puts you at a disadvantage. Because if they're willing to utilize tactics and things to win that you aren't willing to, then more than likely you're going to lose. Especially if you're already at a number and resource disadvantage like they seem to be from what they're talking about.
Blood on your hands, and not all of it is yours.
Hamat grinned in reply.
I never said I'd let those bastards live, my brother.
Angron woke with a start. He had torn the sheets off his bed. His covers were slick with sweat. Hamat was gone. Hamat had died 2 weeks later after the ambush, succumbing to infection. They had never had enough supplies, never enough food, never enough shelter, never enough medicine. They had been doomed from the start. The Primarch rose slowly. His huge shoulders sagged as a sigh rippled throughout his body. His back was a tapestry of scar tissue, knotted like taut rope. He had suffered wounds from every weapon known to humanity. Lasfire, bullets, bolts, blades, even artillery and orbital fire. Angron had suffered them all. He threw on a loose tunic, blind to the holes and rips in the coarse fabric.
Definitely shows the durability of a Primarch.
It was late into the night cycle of the Adamant Resolve, and the corridors were silent but for the soft whir of machinery and the occasional groan of a disfigured menial servitor. Angron walked barefoot towards the command decks, hoping to meet no one. The floor grating was cold and sharp against the soles of his feet, a scintilla of pain sending an ice shudder down his back. The Primarch meandered, fighting the urge to return to his room and go back to bed. Everything felt so tiring, so tiresome. But Angron did not want to sleep. He did not want to dream once more of his stolen home.
Father.
Angron grunted at his equerry's greeting, not hiding his annoyance. Khan's shoulders tightened. He had a broad frame, muscular and powerful, but he still seemed small before his Primarch. Spots of blood still stained the Marine's white armor, souvenirs of the recent slaughter. Khan advanced, his stance aggressive and defiant. Angron smiled thinly. So many of his dogs would have retreated from Angron's displeasure, but not Khan, a disobedient hound. Out of all the whelps that called themselves his children, Khan irritated Angron least of all.
You should have joined us in the slaughter, Father. It was a spectacle.
Probably doesn't like being called father either. Like, I know if I were in his position, if y'all called me father, I'd want to fucking backhand him. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't call me that.
I have seen butchery before, Khan.
The Primarch noted the equerry's muscles tense, as if the Marine was about to pounce.
What?
Khan wrinkled his nose into a snarl.
You should have been there. You should have celebrated the victory with us. You are supposed to be our commander. Oh, the dogs pine for scraps, do they?
Even now, the nails scratched at Angron's mind, urging him to kill.
How would you even be able to sleep with that thing in your brain all the time like that? You know what I mean? Like the idea that you have this machine just goading you towards anger, pulling out like the worst of your instincts, you know, to just kill and do things in rage and induce rage. Like, how would you even be able to like really sleep properly, you know, with that? Because that thing wouldn't even shut off. Like, would your dreams just be like full of rage and hate and anger as well? Was it something you could like never really escape?
But Angron knew that Khan would neither retreat nor defend himself. For that reason alone, Angron held himself back.
When you named us your World Eaters, you committed yourself to lead us. What have we done but obey your commands and kill in your name? What have we done to dishonor or displease you? You displease me by your very nature, Khan.
By being existed,
we
yeah.
are made in your image. Perhaps that displeases me as well. That we are in your image. Or do you resent your own reflection? Both. I resent the Emperor's claim upon me as designer and maker, as if I am some instrument he has crafted for his own purpose. I resent my legion. These loyal dogs he has somehow bred from my seed, who have the audacity to call themselves my sons after the sterile rape of my flesh. I resent the explicitness of my purpose, the gene-forged strength of my limbs that steals the glory from my deeds and lays them at the feet of the so-called master of mankind. Who?
I mean, he brings up a lot of good points, you know? He has a lot of things that were done against his will without his consent. And the fact that every time he does something, you know, it's always done in the Emperor's name and not his. So he will never essentially reap any glory from anything he ever does, because it's always in the Emperor's name and the Emperor's will.
Has need of masters, Khan. Dogs and slaves. Nothing else. We are what we are. I am not his. I do not cede my destiny to the whim of some distant high rider.
Out of sheer instinct, Khan's hand shot to the axe at his side. Angron glowered, silently willing his equerry to draw his weapon and face the Primarch in combat. The nails were insistent now, flooding his mind with bursts of adrenaline,
Don't feel like that's gonna end well.
sending him to the very brink of violent rage. But Khan's hand moved away from the hilt of his axe.
You may not be his father, but we are yours. Is that what you want? To be my dogs? To be my slaves? Should I throw chains on you, whelp? Should I clasp you in collars?
Khan's eyes glittered. Angron wasn't sure if he was anguished or furious.
Do what you will. We are not ashamed to be made in your image. We are not ashamed to be your dogs, if that's what you insist on calling us. Yes, my warhounds, my eaters of worlds. Ha! I should never have named you thus. I should never have given you the dignity of comparing you to my true brothers and sisters. We serve at your command. Yes. Yes. You serve. My true brothers fought alongside me. You fight for me. Well bred. Well
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even as a Primarch, though, like, I guess it's the idea that at least at that point in time with those gladiators, he might have felt like they were like his equal in some way, even though they really wouldn't be, you know, but they at least went through the same kind of trauma he did. So, like, they have that kind of relation with each other. And there was obviously history and background and friendship based off of that. So he felt like he was among equals, and now he's forced around essentially lesser versions of himself, you know? But the Astartes are just lesser versions of him, something he didn't want, and are a constant reminder of his, I guess, potential failings, and, yeah. Just the idea that he's constantly served to the Emperor. Indeed.
trained.
Indeed he can.
The Emperor had it right. Warhounds. Dogs.
Khan was silent, though Angron could see that the equerry was seething, barely restrained violence shimmering in the air between them. Angron slammed his fist into the wall, leaving a great indent in the plasteel. He felt his knuckles fracture, the pain letting loose another surge of wrath that he barely repressed. He glared at Khan, but his equerry had not moved, staring at his Primarch with an expression of desperate pain and incandescent fury.
The Emperor has made me a High Rider. He has given me a legion and commands me to rule them. I did not want this, Khan. I wanted to die on Deshelika Ridge. I could have died well, a free man, but he denied me that. Once more, I am a gladiator. I am given many trinkets, but a gilded chain is still a chain. Well, if I am a High Rider, I must play the part. Isn't that what you said, Khan? That I should not resist the nature my Emperor gave me?
It kind of surprises me that he doesn't just not do what the Emperor wants him to do, right? Like what is it that is keeping him from just defying the Emperor and just not following the Emperor's orders and just doing whatever he wants to? Like, obviously, the Emperor would send another, legion against them, probably Lehman Russ and the Space Wolves, if he were to go rogue. And, then there'd be a battle between them, and whoever would come out on top would come out on top. More than likely, I feel like that's what would happen. But it's like, why is he just going with the Emperor then? Like, if he feels so much this way, why is he just doing what the Emperor tells him to do? Why wouldn't he just go ahead and say, fuck it? Like, I don't want to follow you. I would rather die a free man. So I'm going to make this choice to defy you. And you're going to send your dogs after me. And I can at least die with the dignity and knowledge that I acted on my own accord and not, what you made me to do. Maybe there's some kind of ingrained genetic programming involved where, he has to listen to the Emperor, maybe on some subconscious level that's there. I don't know.
Very well, then. I will become them. I will take back my power. I will break you and mutilate you. I will show the galaxy what you truly are. I will put you in chains, Khan. If that is what you want.
Khan replied steadily, though Angron could hear the disappointment and anger beneath his words.
So be it. Let my dogs truly be remade in my image, mutilations and all. A command, dog. You want a command? Let it be this. Task the Tech Marines to begin implementing the Butcher's Nails across the Legion. Let them study and craft devices of torture that resemble mine, and have them collar each dog that dares call himself my son.
Angron studied his equerry's reaction. On Khan's face was disgust, outrage, and hurt, but there was another emotion in his eyes that disgusted the Primarch to his core. Hope.
Yeah.
Hope that by submitting, Angron would accept Khan as his son.
As you command, Father.
Angron waited until...
And really, Angron just wanted the opposite. He wanted someone to stand up to him and say no.
Khan had left him and buried his face in his hands.
I am sorry, Hamat. I can't be powerless any longer. I can't.
He willed himself to sob, to fill his eyes with grief and to collapse like a little boy upon the ground. But even now the nails were draining the emotion away. The tears would not come. The despair and loss shimmered into nothing, shadowed by a dull, aching pain that Angron would never be able to fully process and feel. The Lord of the Red Sands studied his broken hand. Already the Emperor's design was working well, the fractures in his bones closing up and healing into lumpen shape. Once, Angron had thought himself tough, resilient, a quick healer. But now he knew the truth. He flinched at the sound of horns in the distance. He did not know if the sound was real, but it felt real to him.
All right. Well, there we go. Another great video by the Vox and the Void. Abuse, Angron Tale, Warhammer 40K audio. Links will be down below in the description to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to Vox and the Void channel. So please do me a favor, click those links. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and give the man a sub if you enjoy his content. I mean, you know, overall, you kind of have to like feel like from Angron's point of view that he has, you know, some justification. The idea that he essentially has always had everything taken from him. He's always been a slave. The one time where he felt like free and alive was during his rebellion. That was taken away from him by the Emperor. And then not only that, the realization that he was crafted to begin with, and that all his physical traits, his healing, all that kind of stuff weren't just, you know, him being strong and resilient and tougher than everyone else, was actually just him being essentially crafted that way. And then, yeah, the idea of him essentially still being forced to go out in the universe and carry out the Emperor's will. It is, like I said, I do have the question of why doesn't he just not follow the Emperor's orders? You know, why doesn't he just say, I'm not going to do this, rebel, and, you know, have his final stand against whoever the Emperor would send against them, and say, hey, you know, wipe me out, kill me, whatever, but, you know, at least I'm going to die a free man doing what I want to with my own free will and not following anyone else. That, I guess, is a question that I would have. I would assume the answer probably is that the Emperor has some kind of genetic trait in there where he has to kind of like really listen and follow the Emperor. If the Emperor really, you know, gives any kind of commands, I think probably all the Primarchs have something like that in there. Some kind of subconscious like loyalty and want to follow the Emperor, but yeah, great kind of, you know, origin story tale of really, I mean, it really just gives you perspective into Angron and why he really hates the Emperor, and honestly a lot of it's kind of seemingly justified, you know, with everything that he'd had to go through, and then having a legion of essentially followers that blindly follow his will without any say. You know, he just wants to be among equals, and there really are no other equals other than the other Primarchs. And I don't really know exactly how the other Primarchs view him, other than I think they feel he's a bit more, you know, of a loose cannon because of essentially how quick to fly off the handle he is because of, you know, the nails in him. So I don't think he necessarily has that great of a relationship with a lot of the other Primarchs. So he still might not necessarily really feel like he's among equals even against them. So, but great video nonetheless. As I said, links will be down below in the description. As you can see, we're doing this reaction live with my YouTube members. If you would like to come in and join the discussions when we do these live reactions, we'd love to have you guys come in here and join us and add your 2 cents to the conversations. Give any kind of, you know, insights on anything that we're watching. There's a link down below in the description, as well as a join button underneath the video. You can click those, see if any of the YouTube membership tiers have any you know, interest for you. You can get early access to videos, priority in any kind of reaction requests, etc., etc. So just take a look at those, see if they have any interest for you, if you decide you want to take your support to the next level. But yeah, thanks for watching the video, guys. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day whenever you're at and whenever you're watching this. Hope you guys have a good one. Thank you. Talk to you guys later.